Cesare è morto, il nuovo Cesare è in arrivo.
Era una civice, oggi sono un re, questa è la vita. TSU termino term, Arianna e Sperate.
And welcome back to the Gnostic Informant, and you are about to attain true gnosis. And that little special intro was a clip from an old movie that's loosely based on Petronius' Satyricon. I just wanted to sort of portray the madness and wildness and sort of how these satires were done in the ancient Greek world, Roman world actually, too. My guest today is Mandy Moorehall, who just stepped out for a second. He might have had a connection issue, but I'm sure he'll be right back. And we're going to talk about satires today. And this is like the ancient Greek performance. This is like the drama, if you will. There's like you got comedies and you got tragedies. Then you have satires. Is this different form of drama? It's sort of in the middle. It's sort of in the middle of comedy and tragedy. And I'm not sure where he went, but he'll be back in a second. Pretty sure. So with that, there's a super chat. Thank you for the super chat. Let's see, where'd it go? Jamie Lindbrunner, thank you for the super chat. What does the satires have to do with the satire? Now, I don't know if that's where the etymology is, which I think it might be or it might not. I've heard like people say it could be both, but I do know that in the ancient Greek choruses, when during the choruses, the satyrs would come out and they would mock or like laugh or joke or poke fun at the expense of the crowd and the protagonists. So I don't know if that's why it's called that or if it's just some sort of connection there. And I'm not an expert. I don't know. I'm just guessing right now. But yeah. So yeah, he said internet dropped. My brother's health. It's no problem. No worries. I'll keep everybody. Oh, there we go. We're back.
I'm back. I don't know. I just something just happened.
I kept everybody warmed up. We're all good to go.
The Ayn Randian cultists came after me again, and they dropped my stream. It's been happening to me. I got kicked off of social media for it.
Somebody's pulling hexes on you right now.
I got kicked off of social media because the Ayn Randian cultists came after me.
Really?
And that was actually kind of the goal. I was just trying to see how long I can stay on social media without being a bigot. What does it take to get kicked off of social media without being a bigot? Yeah. It's actually really, really hard. You got to upset a lot of Ayn Randian cultists. And ironically, they come after you for copyright. They don't believe in copyright. It's against their religion, but they'll come after you if you upset them.
This is a good way to introduce you to some people who might not know you. You are Mandy Moorehall, and why are these so basically what I'm asking, why are they mad at you is like, who are you and what is your philosophy and worldview?
So let me put it this way. I think the best way to introduce myself, it's a very traditional way of doing it, is to open a book and give a reference to a dead German guy. Do you mind if I do that for a second? Okay, if you have your copy of On the Use Value and Abuse Value by Frederick Marx, the classic one, please open the page 666, if you will.
Nice.
I'm going to do that. Do you have your copy on you, Neil?
No, yeah, I have it right
here. Okay,
here.
I have my copy here, page 666. It's the quote that I want to start with. It goes like this. It says, "The history of all hitherto societies is the history of y'all struggling to understand satire."
Ooh, nice.
Is that enough of introduction? Does everybody understand where I'm coming from with this? We're talking layers on top of layers on top of layers of jokes. I've had my assistant with me tonight, helping me out with all of this. So thank you very much.
Nice, Chewy.
Jokes on jokes on jokes on jokes on jokes on jokes on jokes.
That was a inside Amon joke right there.
You want to see an inside Amon joke?
See how I got you had the chew.
Look at this inside Amon joke. Do you guys see that
background? Look at
none of you have noticed Amon's teapot during his live streams. I got Amon's teapot. It's right there. I got it. I've got my own Chewy. Let's do this. Let's get it weird. You ready to get weird?
We already did one necromancy. How many more we got going?
How many more necromancies can we do? This is the point. I had a friend that if your audience knows me from anywhere, your audience knows me from my performance on Drawing Down the Stars last week. Yeah. Where Snappy and I put on a performance of one of the most classic types of performances of all time, which is a chaos witch having a conversation with a mystic, and a mystic who happened to be on mushrooms. So if anybody's watching, watch that. Let's do that YouTube thing and go back, play the drinking game, and see how many times I break character, because I was in character the entire time. So you can go back in the comments down there and timestamp say Mandy Moorehall broke character here. He was being real with y'all, because I've been in character this whole time. That's why the live stream happened. I was like, oh no, I forgot to get in character. It's dropped at first. I was like, I forgot to get in character. I faked the whole thing.
Nice.
Or it was the Ayn Randian cultists.
Now, what are they mad about? What happened?
All right. I have a line in a song. It goes like this. It says, I'm finna decalcify my pineal gland. Believe all women except Ayn Rand. Which is incredibly funny. They are very. Do you see? That's the effect that I was trying to get there. You see that?
It was good.
It's one of my favorite lines. It's a call and response at the end of my set. So when the crowd knows that it's believe all women, and they shout back, except Ayn Rand, and it's this really epic moment for everybody that's in on the joke.
Right.
And by the time the 20-minute performance that I put on, doing live music is I put on, it's done. You're kind of in on it. You go, he's referencing all sorts of philosophers, and if you don't know the philosophers that I'm referencing, you're not going to understand the jokes that I'm telling.
And you're not going to hold people's hand through this stuff.
And I'm not going to hold people's hands.
That's what I like. It causes you to go out and learn something. Look this stuff up. What is he talking about? Who's Ayn Rand? Who's this? Who's that?
Mm-hmm. It's in the spirit of satire. It's what people have been doing forever, taking ideas, appropriating them for their own uses, flipping them on their heads, and just to try to entertain people. And I do a particular form of satire that one of my friends described as it was hyper absurd post satire, where basically every moment is a satirical moment. When the world's my stage, and I have this habit of setting up jokes that I never actually get to see the payoff. Like all of you can do this when you feel like it. Go to Walmart, walk around Walmart, go to the arts and crafts section, grab a fake apple, walk to the other side of the store, put it with the real apples, and just walk out. You've just engaged in hyper absurd post satire. You're never going to see the payoff of that joke, but you can put yourself in the position of being a person that happened to, right? A person in the future that doesn't exist yet. You're playing a joke on a person you're never going to see, and it's such a silly, harmless joke that they're going to be like, "How'd that get here?" And they're not going to know that some bald-headed jerk walked down and put it there. So
if you a lot of scholars that I talk to that know about the Satiricon, Petronius.
Mm-hmm.
And not even Petronius, but Juvenal. I'm actually holding the Penguin juveniles right here.
Check that out.
They can't even. They don't even know half the stuff means because it's satire.
Mm-hmm.
So you had to be living in the time period to grasp the social layers that are there. So people today that translate this stuff are like, I can kind of pick off some of these, what he's talking about. But some of this stuff, I'm like, what is he even talking about? That's because the context is gone. He's not holding your hand through this stuff. The punchlines, the context, you had to be there. It's not written for us. This is written for a different time period. However, we can interpret it now in different ways. So it's not like we can't read it anymore. That's the beauty of it.
That's the point of it, was so that, this is a way of structuring jokes, not necessarily a way, like, you can take the idea, the concept of the joke and apply it to your own uses. That's that's what separates satire from other forms of art. The closest relative of satire is clowning. And clowning is probably the oldest art form of all time. It's the art form where you take an object and you pretend that it's a different object. And when you're doing that and you're engaging in reality with objects, you're engaging as a clown. When you take that idea and you put it into the realm of concepts, like things that, like an extra layer deep, then you're in the realm of satire. And satire is such an interesting place to be that it has all sorts of depths that people who don't engage in satire don't recognize. It can devolve into an art form where I'm literally living my entire life in a character like I've just now, when I turned 30 something, putting a name to, but I've been doing this my whole life,
Yeah. And like, just to give somebody an example of,
hell yeah,
this is from this Juvenal's 16 satires, and he's sort of poking fun at the religious zeitgeist at the time, sort of like cracking jokes on it. He says he is that makes intercession for wives who failed to abstain from sex on all prescribed and ritual feast days, exacting huge penalties when the marriage bed is polluted, or whenever the silver serpent of Isis appears to nod. He's like saying, like, which one is it? Is it cool to have sex, or is it bad to have sex?
yeah.
Then he says, his tears and professional mutterings will guarantee absolution. Osiris has been well bribed with a fat ghost and a slice of sacrificial cake. The moment he's gone, a palsied Jewess, parking her hay box outside, comes begging in a breathy whisper. She interprets Jerusalem's laws. She's the tree's high priestess. And like, what is that, an Ashra joke? Like,
is that an Ashra joke? Yeah, you see, and if you don't know about the Ashra, you're never going to see it.
Yeah, he doesn't hold your hand, right?
He's not like, holding your hand through it,
right?
He's never.
I love.
I'm sorry. We have this. No, we're having such a good time already. We're talking over each other. It's kind of in the spirit of the satire. So it's
right. But that's exactly the point. Is like, it's about laughing at the times that we're living in, and like hitting that core. It's like it's in the middle of dark but also funny.
It can be. It's not necessarily that. That's the most popular form that it takes. It's one of the easiest for sure. Telling jokes is very, very easy, and it's one of those things that people really understand. But when you do sort of there's ways of doing satire that aren't necessarily jokes, where you're sort of just being sort of a word clown, where the word salad is the point. You're sort of just going on and seeing what sticks, hoping that somebody else will then take what's stuck and do something with it. So that's still a form of satire where you're making fun of whatever medium that it is, where it's you're subverting the medium itself. And the point is to inspire rather than to entertain. That is still satire because you're satirizing the performance art itself, right? You're sort of doing a kind of satirizing what somebody would do at church, where they riff on all of these ideas from their Bible, and whatever sticks, and you go on to your week until next Sunday and like think about that thing. It's like, oh, that was so much fun. I thought about that. They're not doing it as satire because they aren't satirists. So not all satire is satirical. Only satire that satirists do is satirical. So you can have a genuine joke, and it's not necessarily satire. It's just a joke. Does that make any sense? Because this is how you're thinking in deep levels here. Yeah. Like irony isn't just, oh, I tell a joke and it's like, ha ha ha, that's a funny joke. It's kind of the intro level. Children do that, and children they engage in clownery. So when you're trying to do that stuff, and you're doing it sincerely, you're just being a clown. You're not being a satirist. You're being a word clown.
Yeah.
Which is,
I was going to say Aeschylus and a couple other poets of the time would have a chorus of satyrs come out and mock the protagonist. Is that, and I'm wondering, was this where that satire comes from? Maybe.
Yeah, it's sort of taking the concept of so this is in traditional, like actually theater performances, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's sort of I don't want to just say that satire is a stage performance, because the type of satire that I do, my absurd satire, the world's my stage. So I'm not doing like theaters, but there are things that you do within the theater because of the structure of the theater, the structure of the stage, the way the audience is prepared to engage with you. So if you are kind of engaging with the audience in a way that they don't normally engage with a theater, with a theater performance, it can become a level of satire where the audience is in on the joke, right? And not necessarily all of the audience members are in on the joke. And I'm using in on the joke as sort of a catch-all for the concept of satire, not just the joke. You know what I mean? It's an easy catch-all, which is why people think of satire as being funny all the time. There's unfunny satire. There's very serious forms of satire, but they're not as easy to engage with.
Sure.
It's difficult to engage with, and they're hard to explain. Even when people do it, in our age, which is why the spectacle is so easy to satire. You can do a satirical spectacle, and you're making fun of the idea of spectacle. It's kind of a weird thing if you're making fun of the idea of anti-spectacle, then you kind of get into the realm of the type of art that I do. It's like this anti-spectacle, hyper absurd post satire. So the reason I look so much at other satires, because my art form is so ridiculous that I can draw from so many other forms of satire, and it's like it just elevates my art. Do you know what I mean?
I have a sample from your channel that you just released. You want to play this?
Check that out. Or did we hit the 15-minute mark? Were you not going to get demonetized for me swearing?
We're at 17. So
look at that. We did it. Let's I think
I was whizzing right by.
So let's do this. Let's play the video, right? And I want your audience to take a look at the chorus, right? And then at the end, like during this playing, see if they can figure out what classic Greek character I'm making reference to. And the cheat code is in the doob underneath this, and we'll reveal that afterwards. So so let's do that YouTube thing where we engage with the chat to get the algo going.
Yeah,
I've been doing this like OG. I'm OG with this stuff. I'm trying to help you out here. So let's play. Let's play. This is gonna be fun.
Awesome.
I just put this out like an hour ago before.
Yeah, I haven't even got a chance to check this one out yet.
This is gonna be great.
Awesome. All right, let's go.
Shout out to Scoby1 for doing the video and all that. I can't do any of this without Scoby1 the beat song. So shout out to him. He's watching and he's chatting with y'all in the comments.
Shout out to Scoby.
Shout out to Scoby.
Oh, wait a minute. I gotta do.
Wait a minute.
I think I got the audio messed up. So let me just.
I heard it.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, my voice, the voice that's recorded is different than my actual voice. That's purposeful. So it's a mask that I wear without wearing a mask. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Smoke him if you got him.
Listen. Yo. The cops don't been called. We're standing around like nothing's happening. Shit, that's a bad habit. That's a bad habit. That's a bad habit. Sandra said don't drink the water. It's all Greek to me. Shit. But I keep instructions, maybe. What I'm saying is my vision's hella hazy. Listen, flat tires, Shit's Creek, my satires on fleek. Flat tires, Shit's Creek, my satires on fleek. Flat tires, Shit's Creek, my satires on fleek. Flat tires, Shit's Creek, my satires on a whole different level of irony. You know what I mean? No?
Hell yeah, Neil, you got the character yet? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Post millennials bumping Post Malone. I've been working on my timing and my vocal tone. Y'all a bunch of fucking half-wits. You don't know the half of it. At your peak, you're still well below average.
Oh no.
Eureka fermented cabbage.
Everybody sing it out. Sing it to yourselves.
Flat tires, Shit's Creek, my satires on fleek. Flat tires, Shit's Creek, my satires on fleek. Flat tires, Shit's Creek, my satires on fleek. Flat tires, Shit's Creek, my satires on a whole different level of iron. You know what I mean? It's like an inside joke that like no one's supposed to get. You know what I mean? It's like a post-satire, post-ironic, like Andy Kaufman-esque social experiment where I don't know if I'm the joke or you're the joke or if we're all the joke. Right. Actually, if I'm being honest, it's more like a hip-hop Andrew Dice Clay kind of situation where I forget where the fucking character begins and where I end. You know what I mean?
Neil, I think if anybody knows what I mean, you know what I mean. Do you know who I'm resurrecting there? Who I'm embodying?
That do?
No. This is Greek. Do you catch the hook? It said flat tires, Shit's Creek, my satires on fleek.
It's ancient Greek?
Yeah, and it's ancient Greek. Take a look down there in the doob. It's gonna be the big reveal. Let's see how well you know. Oh. You see what I did there? Dude, you get a flat tire. That's unlucky. You're up Shit's Creek without a paddle.
One layer away.
Unlucky Elpenor.
Yeah.
You see that? I wrote a song.
Elpenor the unlucky. That's
hey, look at that.
I love it.
I wrote that in 2019. I recorded it in 2020 and put it out in 2001. You can hear it on the album Down in the Doob.
Let me ask you this: who made that beat? That was
I did.
You made that, so you did the whole thing.
Yeah, I make the beats. My brother makes it sound good. I'm a Luddite. I don't actually know how to use this stuff. Like he came up when the computer crashed. I ran down there. I was like, I don't know, something happened. I literally don't know how to do the magic to make these things. You know, there's always a secret code and like that's a wand that you have to wave to be able to make these things work. And I don't know how to make the wand. I don't know the codes. It's all magic to me. But I do the nonsense and he makes it sound good, which is, if you know like your history, such a classic situation where he's sort of the technician, the person making, like the craftsman behind the art. You know what I mean? There's a separation between craft and art. And my brother is very much the craftsman behind this project, where he's able to make these things sound good, able to do the leveling, the technical stuff. He made the video and like did all that. I just wrote the nonsense and performed the words and made the music. He made the music sound good. And that's the person that is written out of history all the time. Is the person, you know what I mean? We don't have the names of the people who wrote the Bible. We just have a name that's assigned to them. And that's sort of what do you see what I'm getting at here? Is like there's people behind these stuff.
Yeah, especially that's a good example. The Gospels, who put together those texts. We have names like Luke and Mark, but like those names they don't even think those names are even put on those till later.
Yeah, no.
So is it a committee of people? Is it one genius? I doubt that. But like, yeah, you're right. You lose that to time. And you know what I was just thinking too? My content that I do when I do my own pre-recorded stuff, it's closer to art than it is to video essays or like academic work.
Absolutely.
I'm probably more on the artist side than I am on the like YouTube academic side.
That's why I'm drawn to your. That's why I've been drawn to your channel, and I share your stuff with my friends, because it's not dry academic stuff. It's like you engage with it in like a way that's, you know, in the spirit of the text, rather than just like,
that's what I'm trying.
Oh, it has to be this way, and this is the words that they meant. No, Sindona didn't mean medicated bandage, and no, it didn't mean where that thing was wrapped. No, it wasn't wrapped around that slave boy's penis.
You know who inspired me the most is Will Durant. When I was reading Will Durant, and he said that what separates me from other academics of his time is he takes history at face value, which that's the anti-academic way to take his. You're supposed to you're supposed to analyze, you're supposed to suspend judgment and like be critical of everything if you're in the academic mode. But I like to take history at face value and say, why are they saying this? Not did they say this? Is it historical? Like I'm sort of past the did it happen or not, and now I'm starting to get more interested in why they write this. What's behind it? Why is Jesus saying that, you know, if thine eye be single, the whole body be full of light? Like, what was that? What is he talking about? I don't care if he said it or not. I don't care if it's historical. I want to know why the author wrote that.
Yeah, that's not no one like I've been trolling weirdos on the internet with this like Jesus mythicist debate for so long. Like you can go back to like some forums and stuff, and there's these long debates going on back and forth. That's me talking to myself, pretending to be an academic. Like I'm showing you how ridiculous these debates are because it's a stalemate.
Yeah.
Any objective, if there's anything in the world that is objectivity, you look at both sides of the Jesus mythicist debate, and it's a stalemate.
It really is.
No one can say anything. And you know who said that? You know who said that first and was like, you know, way down and said, you both are idiots? Nietzsche, the Antichrist. That was written when this Jesus mythicist debate stuff started.
Mythicism was in its prime too.
Yeah. And he was friends with Bruno Bauer, who was like the first guy that did the Jesus mythicist stuff. Where he like sincerely like engaged. Bruno Bauer sincerely engaged with. I would love to like talk to somebody and like you know read his work in German and like get a good translation, because I don't think one exists. So I'm only like reading what he said through other people. But you know he sincerely engaged with this stuff and came out on the mythicist side. And then at his time, and this was he was debating Karl Marx and making Karl Marx look like a fool. And he was also a satirist.
Yeah. Oh, and those German mythicists they had their conclusion isn't that Jesus was some pre-existing archangel type tradition that we lost. They were just saying it was just made up by gospel writers, and he fits this archetype of son of God's. Period. Period. That actually for me is plausible.
Yeah,
you can't prove otherwise. It's like
and you know, and that's why I just, you know, obviously you just being a weirdo edgelord, you end up in these spaces where you see a certain guy, you know, giving lectures, and it's kind of like, all right, well, I'm going to read the book, and then I read it and I go, oh, this is like analytical philosophy stuff where you're like doing this modus ponens bullshit, dotting your I's and crossing your T's and make sure your P's and your Q's all do your thing, and fucking Bayes' theorem is dumb because numbers aren't real. So like it's just such a weird thing. So you're trying to go over here and like prove something using numbers, but numbers themselves aren't real. So it relies on
not only that when you're using the Bayesian model to prove if somebody exists, you have to plug in your own numbers that you came up with. So you say, I give this one a 5 out of 10. I give this one a 7 out of 10. You're still plugging in your own numbers.
Numbers
didn't come to you from the text.
Okay, but do you want to know the real problem with numbers? Nietzsche tells you the real problem with numbers when he's making fun of Immanuel Kant. Numbers don't exist in reality. Numbers are a thing that we assign to. It's a property that we assign to objects in the world. It's not anything intrinsic in the objects themselves. You know, it's a way of us describing what's going on around us. Like, you know, you look at your hands, you look down. in reality, you don't have two hands. You have one left hand and you have one right hand. You don't have two eyes. You have one right eye. You have one left eye. You don't have, like, the concept of two is a thing that we put onto things. It doesn't exist. Like, if you were able to take your hand and say, hand, talk to me, and it wouldn't say, oh, I'm one of a pair. That concept wouldn't like make any sense to your hand in like this abstract sort of a way. And it seems like such a ridiculous way to say it, but like, it's the truth. If you're relying on numbers, you're relying on a metaphor.
Yeah. Especially historical data. It's not like meant to. Someone was telling me the person who came up with the Bayesian model even said something about like, this shouldn't we use for history. But I don't know much about that.
I don't know enough about it. I have this disdain for that approach to like understanding reality. It's just makes me kind of, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth. It makes me icky going like, oh, you're going to rely on numbers. Get out of here. Like,
yeah, exactly. Constellation Pegasus, thank you for the super chat, says, how do you explain people still living in a flat earth? How do you explain people still believing? I'm sorry.
Believing.
Living. Can't read today. All right. Yeah, I don't know.
Propaganda is a very tricky thing. It's one of those things that you can very easily you can convince people all sorts of things. It's not hard. You can string a narrative, and you can. This
is actually interesting to what we're.
I don't chalk it up fully to ignorance. You know what I mean?
If you start with your hypothesis and you lead with that, and you can make anything sound right.
Yeah.
If you go at anything, whether it's flat earth, mythicism, or I don't know, Jesus resurrection, maybe you think if you want him to be resurrected, and you start with the hypothesis, and then you keep that in front of all of your analytics, and you just build off that, and that's like your axiom.
Yeah.
Then you're gonna make it look like it's true.
Well, the rules of the game, the rules of formal debate, were written by, it's the territory of apologists, right? And over time, they got better at losing debates, right? That's all that happened. And they just sort of took certain ideas and they threw them away, took an idea, threw them away, took an idea, threw it away, threw it away, threw it away, threw it away. And these are just sort of these like remnants, like flat earth and conspiracy theories and stuff like that, are just kind of these remnants of things that exist. A lot of it stems from racism and anti-Semitism and stuff like
part
that,
of it,
where they look at academia as this, conspiracy theories of gatekeepers and all of that stuff. So if you're able to convince yourself, everything that is written in academia is actually upside down, you flip it on its head, you're going to find the truth. Well, okay, if you're going to use that logic, according to your logic, let's take somebody like Ayn Rand. This is my art here. I'm telling you the conspiracy theory that I've been doing. You take Ayn Rand, right? Everything you know about Ayn Rand, let's flip it on its head, see what happens. She becomes a Soviet double agent who was here to confuse right-wingers in America. And that's actually really plausible when you sort of do that, right? If you really kind of think about it and you go, wait, why was she saying this stuff like this? Like, she's completely wrong. And she's a college educated woman who went to school in Soviet Russia. And her best friend was the sister of the dude that wrote Lolita, who was a KGB spy and has all sorts of.
Lolita, that's the book about the child that.
Yeah. So that guy, his sister Olga was best friends with Ayn Rand growing up, and these people have all sorts of connections to what became the NKVD, the Soviet secret police. They were the secret police of the czars of Russia, and they sided with the whites, the white army, right? Ayn Rand and this person.
Ayn Rand is people who like to invoke Ayn Rand, who are. They're on the right, but they want to act like they're center left, and I'm just classic.
It's an act.
Yeah, I've always known. So it's always Ayn Rand, number one, my favorite philosopher. Ayn Rand. She was so centrist.
None of these people they've actually never read her. Like, I've read every single word that lady has written, and it's all complete garbage. And it's not like I'm a conspiracy theorist. I just let myself actually think like one. And every once in a while, thinking like one, you end up with something that is actually more plausible of a conspiracy theory than what they're capable of putting together. Because the standard spycraft of the time, standard spycraft of 1920s Soviet Russia, was the most advanced spycraft in the world at the time. There's all sorts of honeypots. There's still to this day active sleeper cells in America from the KGB, and they've been gone for how many years? Still to this day.
Wow.
Like,
yeah, that's crazy. Constellation Pegasus with another one. Thank you very much. Any thoughts on free will, BS determinism? We've got a long way as to what real reality is according to Scale. That's a deep question right there. You want to jump on that one? What do you think?
Yeah, I'm gonna invoke Wittgenstein. So you're playing word games again. There's this thing that philosophy is. It's the art of playing word games. And as a former chef, I describe it as being basically you have two ways of approaching this. You can do the analytical stuff where you basically make a crudité. You know what a crudité is? It's a vegetable platter with a dip. All the vegetables are separate. The dips are separate. Or you can do word salad. The great thing about word salad is that people think it's healthy people think that salad's good for them, right? Like they're obsessed when they're on a diet, they're going and eating salads, but they never think about how much like ranch dressing turns salad into ranch dressing soup with lettuce. So this is my approach to philosophy: is it's all word games, and you're never going to even approach anything that resembles reality if you're playing word games with yourself. So you got to first be real with yourself and really understand like where all of these silly ideas come from, because all of your ideas are covered in metaphysical hyperpoop. And if you just like keep letting people that had bad ideas back in the day influence you, you're going to get metaphysical metaphorical hyper food poisoning. And that's not a thing that I suggest anybody does to themselves. Just wash your hands and wash your lettuce. You are what you eat.
This is sort of what Descartes was getting at, where it's like, you know, at some point you have to just take reality for what it is. Like you kind of just have to slice it with Occam's razor and say like, oh yeah, could it be all predetermined and we're all just playing out this tape of some god that like pushed the button and we're all just here and we just think we have free will? It's possible, but like, what does that do if I accept that? Then I just sit at home all day and say, I'm just playing the tape that I'm just supposed to be here. It's like, no, at some point you have to realize like I'm conscious. I have hands, I have feet, I have legs, I can walk, I can talk, I can do things. Might as well do it. And then just take your free will on.
Yeah, let me put it this way. This is the thing I do, is this like pseudo mystic performance artist that I do. I just put together aphorisms, and the way that I view life is that it's a game, and the only rule is don't die. And if you die before you die, you'll never die. So
the only rule that you ever.
It's the only rule. It's rule number one. It's the only one that matters.
That's why you get hungry when you don't eat, and it's why you get tired if you don't sleep. Like your body's saying, like you need to do these things or you're gonna die.
That's it. That's it. It's not any more difficult or any more, you don't need to make it any more difficult than that. Just, it's a game. Don't die. And if you have ears to hear, you know how to die before you die. And if you die before you die, you won't die. So play the game and, you know, find the cheat codes. Dude,
I forgot what I was gonna say, but like no, but that approach, though, what you just said, that satirical approach, in a way, is like I'm gonna throw it out there. It's like salvation in a way, because it's like it's not that serious. We shouldn't take life that serious. We're here. What are you gonna do? You know what I mean? Are you gonna like mope around about like how, you know, you're not a millionaire? It's like, what is that? I don't know.
Yeah,
it's not that serious.
Sorry, you want to take this one? What does it say?
Oh yeah, MNAG. Apologists will always start with the premises that the Bible is 100% true. So on that basis, they feel they hold the undisputed truth. Yeah.
Words. The words that the squiggly lines that they wrote down are the squiggly lines of truth. The other squiggly lines aren't the squiggly lines of truth. And you know, their paper that they wrote those squiggly lines on was the best paper. The ink that they wrote them on was the best ink. Yada yada yada. I understand. I get what you're saying. It's marketing. It's not actually truth. And if you're failing to understand propaganda before your very eyes,
you know what's funny about this? There's a Calvinist from the 1700s who did a commentary on the Bible, and when he got to a certain passage about Abraham and his wife Sarah and the circumcision of his son Isaac, he realized that there is a Phoenician text, the one that you know about with the Orphic egg, the one that he was aware of this text, and he knew. That's it. I love that. Let me get a full screen going. That's the Orphic egg right there. So this scholar, who was a predeterminist and a Calvinist, he understood that this text exists, and his way around it was that it must be a prophecy for Abraham.
Oh, that's obvious. That's the obvious answer. Yeah, that's what happened.
Like it doesn't matter how much knowledge he gets. He's starting with that. He's going with that to begin with. Yeah, that's the axiom of truth.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter what other data you give me. I will just make it fit. Mm-hmm. So there's a text that predates the Bible. It looks exactly the same. Does that mean the Bible's based off this? No, it's a prophecy for the Bible. Because why not?
It's the dinosaur bones. It's they put them there so that you could discover them. Just take a look inside the dinosaur bones. That's where the secret stuff's written. It's inside the dinosaur bones. That's where they put it. They hid it. And if you're trying to find it in the obvious places, you're not being divine. You're not thinking like an actual spiritual person. You're convincing yourself a fairy tale. Sorry, man. There's actual interesting ideas going on.
You're right. Here's a brilliant question from Snappy. By the way, go subscribe to Jogging Down the Stars.
Thank you so much, Snappy.
Who wins in a fight, Kafka or Nietzsche?
They both do opium together and laugh at everybody. They don't fight. They would probably wear some sort of costumes and dress up and do something they would just put on a professional wrestling act. And it would be sort of somebody from the crowd would come out and probably hit Kafka hit the referee with the chair, and Kafka and Nietzsche would both fall through a trap door under the stage and come out as a rebirth being and tell some sort of elaborate story as professional wrestling. That's my honest answer to who would win in a fight between Kafka.
See how I segued that?
Do you see how I segued that?
Yeah, you caught it. You caught it.
I see what you did. I smell what you're stepping in.
Tell people what this is.
This is put some thumbs up in the chat if you're a fan of professional wrestling. I'm not watching, but my brother's next to me and he's watching. He's playing the drinking game where every time I break character, he comes in and he takes a sip. So I'm watching him laughing. So anyway, put a thumb up in the chat if you're a fan of professional wrestling and you know what this word kayfabe means.
Hit that thumbs up.
Hit that thumbs up. Hell yeah. So kayfabe is basically the most Greek thing that we do. If you took this Wikipedia page and you translated it into what's the word that I'm looking for? Where you took those letters and transliterate. That's what I was looking for. I get those ones mixed up. Yeah. And you transliterated that, and you could pass this off as an ancient Greek document. And it would confuse classicists, and they would go, "Wow, this is the most Greek thing I've ever heard in my life." And the reason is because it's the most Greek thing you've ever heard in your life. It never stopped, and we still do what the Greeks were doing when they came to satire. We do it in the form of professional wrestling. And if you think I'm crazy, you should probably read that book Mythology by Ronald Bard. I didn't write it. He wrote it in the 50s, and he says this, not me. He uses professional wrestling, relates it to the Greek, and explains professional wrestling. He doesn't use the word kayfabe, and he probably would have loved to be able to look at what we're looking at right now, because that
Pat Patterson right there.
Who was that? Sorry, what?
Pat Patterson, that's like the WWE superstar from back in the day.
Oh, hey, take a look at that. Yeah, sorry, I was lost in thought. So
he said, I remember the guy who would bring our jackets back from the dressing room. Every time he did, someone would yell "Kayfabe." Then one night, the guy decided to stand up for himself and told the whole dressing room, "I don't mind the yelling, but I want to let you know that my name is not Kayfabe, it's Mark." What he didn't know is that wrestlers called people outside of the business marks That's why we were yelling K-fab in the first place. Ah, it's a little
You see that? Look at the jokes. You could put that in Greek and it could come out of the Bible. It's the most Greek stuff. It's
now,
basically
for anyone who doesn't know, the Greek in the ancient Greek world, you had the gymnasium, and you had wrestling was just like it is in America, was an event. It was a spectacle, and it was professional. And wrestlers got so famous, just like how you have Pindar and Homer, they're famous poets and bards. You had famous wrestlers. In fact, Pliny the Elder actually writes about he said there's only 2 people who have ever been deified while they're still alive. Because people get deified after they die all the time. They get, oh, he was a god. But while you're alive, though, he said only 2 people. And one of them was Augustus, obviously. And the second one was a guy named Euthymus, a wrestler from Olympia, who was consecrated as a god while he lived. And so a famous wrestler
from the top rope. Take that, Jesus. He still lived.
Right.
He became a god when he was alive. Take that, Jesus.
Imagine The Rock. And like, think about it. The Rock is sort of like he's sort of like a god man on earth. People love The Rock. Stone Cold. Like, everyone loves Stone Cold. These are like superheroes, but this particular person was a god. Yeah. And so you can see how famous wrestling was. But I just wanted to let everyone know. But yeah, so tell us about this K-fab.
Yeah, so the whole concept of K-fab is basically like not breaking character. And it's kind of like the mask that you wear, and to maintaining the act even outside of the stage. So you're in character in the backstage, you're in character when you're out in public, and it's sort of like what happens at like Disney World, where you have these costumes and you can't take the head off the costume in front of the kids because it's going to scare them. It's kind of the same idea, but you're dealing with adults that are in on the joke. And if you're not in on the joke, you're the one left thinking that professional wrestling is real. And imagine 2,000 years ago, if you saw this professional wrestling performance that blew your mind, and you didn't know that it was scripted, you didn't know that it was fake, and you wrote it down, you could end up with something, and you wrote about your experience. And maybe you were on drugs at the time too. Like the classics all were. Nietzsche says that everybody was on drugs. So if you're taking this thing and you're not in on the joke, you're seeing the spectacle, your mind's blown, you're on drugs, and you write down, your sincere misinterpretation of what's going on, you can end up with something like somebody believing in professional wrestling and not knowing that, it's scripted or that it's fake. And that's kind of the point, right? I met Stone Cold Steve Austin when I was 9 years old, Johnny. Like 9 years old. We went to see Stone Cold Steve Austin. I got his autograph, and he didn't break character. He was in the middle of a mall. He was just in the middle of a mall signing autographs for hours.
Acting like Stone Cold.
He was Stone Cold Steve Austin the whole time. And he's Stone Cold Steve Austin when he's in public. He's not Stone Cold Steve Austin when he's at home and stuff.
316, the rattlesnake.
Yeah. And it's just, and you can see how people can, if you're looking at it as like, oh, they're doing the same thing that professional wrestlers were doing, where they're not breaking character, even outside of, character, or even outside of the confines of the performance space, right? You could interpret one of these people as being a god because you just saw some spectacle act, and then you're interacting with this person. You may be from a distance, right? Nietzsche has this whole thing about how important distance is. Take a look at what he has to say about distance. Distance is important.
Look how Ric Flair comes off.
Yeah. And
the energy that he brings to any event that he goes to.
Ric Flair is Ric Flair when he goes to his children's soccer games. He's on the side. He's woo for his kids when they score a goal. He's Ric Flair. Like, it's one of those things where he's just lost in the character. It's like Andrew Dice Clay, if anybody's a fan of comedy. He was famous in the 80s, and he put on this character of this, like, over the top racist, offensive Italian guy, but he's just like, I know people who've met him, and he's like the nicest guy, and he's not Italian. So it's like he puts a leather jacket on, and hickory dickory dock, and eventually the character.
He was huge.
You just become you are that character. Like people, It's kind of we have the term now, parasocial relationship, which is where, ironically, where a fan of a show interacts with one of their favorite host of a show, and it kind of has this pretend pseudo relationship. I don't know if you're familiar with that word, being a content creator. Parasocial relationships.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, there's this concept of parasocial relationships that was true back then too. Because think about it this way, like the passage that you read, they're talking about going to festivals every month, right? So that's a thing you looked forward to. That was your outing. You went to these festivals where these performances were. You know what I mean? So you had all sorts of opportunities to be able to see these
Every
things
month.
happen. And the stories, depending on the festival that was happening, the characters would adapt the story, right? And it's not just one individual performance happening at these things. There's multiple performances happening all over the place. Like there's a big agricultural fair up the street from me every year, and they have like the baby pigs over here, and they have like time for the children to come learn about baby pigs, right? And they talk all about this stuff about like, sometimes they make up stories about baby pigs, and you read stories about baby pigs, and you can like hear a story about a baby pig and see a baby pig, and it gives you a different experience, right? There's I think it's either Roman or ancient Greek actually, where they use a pig as a stand-in for some classical character. I'm not good at remembering the names of the characters, but I'm good at remembering sort of the motifs and the gist of what's going on. So if maybe I'm throwing some keywords out here, you can find what I'm talking about to show your audience that I'm not making this up. I'm riffing right here off the top of my head. This is coming off the dome. So there's this story where they took the figures are all pigs, and they're stand-ins. The names are puns too, and the puns explain the dynamics going on between the characters of the pigs, and to the people at the time they were relatable because they were doing this mimesis thing, drawing from common stories. Somebody is bound to know what it is that I'm talking about right now. That's why I ended up in Baby Pigland, talking about Baby Pigland, because they're taking these stories and using them to communicate to children. It might be Homer, it might be something. It's essentially
what you're saying sounds familiar. I just can't.
Somebody knows what I'm talking about, and I didn't intend to. What was that?
Are you talking about the mysteries of Eleusinian mysteries?
I don't know what I'm talking about.
In the Eleusinian mysteries, when they got initiated, this is in Athens. When they got Athens, they would bring baby pigs. You would bring baby pigs to the ceremony.
Okay.
And it's not quite clear. I was talking to Dr. Lip about this. Look, we have sources that talk about these pigs. They're bringing to the center. We don't know what they were doing with them. They just know that they brought them there.
So maybe this actually, like, I'm not a crazy person here, actually, like putting all these links together, because this is just a story that, like, going to agricultural fairs and being a chef butchering pigs, I just kind of look at what like these old stories about this, and I eventually at some point stumbled across the story where they're using pigs as stand-ins for historical characters and using witty puns and stuff on like the names of the pigs. It's actually somebody will find it in the future.
Eumolpus was so this is what happened. Eumolpus is the swineherd who was tending his crops and stuff, or whatever, his farm. And when the chasm opened up on the ground, when Hades came up to take Persephone to bring her down, he was the witness. And so, for some reason, in honor of him, they brought pigs to the rites, to the festivals. Okay,
can I explain how that happens?
Yeah,
like how that phenomenon happens. These are stage instructions. They're not necessarily, like when you're at these agricultural fairs. You have access to things. So, if you have access to pigs, you put the pigs on the stage, right? And then over time, people riff on this idea and use the pigs as a stand-in, which is, these are agricultural fairs. These are performances and satires taking place on agricultural fairs. So the audience at the time knows this stuff. And it's kind of like how you can see a genre of music evolve over 50 years. Take something like punk rock from like, Iggy Pop all the way to, punk rock bands now, like somebody like Gel. You can see the lineage, the genealogy, to invoke Nietzsche again. You can see the genealogy of how this stuff goes, but we don't have the genealogy of the performance anymore. But you can deduce by certain it's kind of like if you took a movie and you put it into a bookified form, right? You're going to lose some of the nuance. It's kind of like the effect of taking a book and then putting it to a movie, but in reverse. You see how many things can get lost in the message there, right? Like it can take 2 hours to describe something that in reality only took 15 seconds. You know what I mean? So there's all sorts of opportunity to lose that, but you don't have that when you're putting something into book form, because you relate with a book differently, right? Books don't get riffed on in book form. That takes a much longer time than something like a performance or something like a genre of music or something like, you know what I mean? Like satire, right? The all of these evolutions of the story get lost in over time because they're not written down, right? The people that were performing these plays, sometimes they were children. Children don't know how to read. So, you know, when you're trying to give people stage instructions that don't know how to read, you're improvising with what you have available to you at the time. You know what I mean? So this improvisation over time process is lost because it can't be written down. It's not written down. The people who did it they weren't the type of people who wrote things down, right? They were performers. Then a lot of time they were traveling performers, which is why you see these sort of things circulate, because they're traveling from one performance space up to another, and making rounds like people do when they tour bands now, and touring comedians. That same thing happened. People toured from this place to that place to that place to that place, and they traveled. Like right?
Nero's, I think it's like 64 in that year. He toured all of Greece and performing like he was an actual lyre player, musician, and actor, performing like 6-hour plays sometimes.
Mm-hmm. And you know, to get it back to professional wrestling, I mean, this same thing happens where, you know, you have certain like legendary things that happen at a certain city along the tour, you know, whatever run of shows that's happening at that time. And you have all sorts of like legendary things, and they're usually named after like the city that it happened. And I really wish right now off the top of my head I could remember the whole controversy with like Bret the Hitman Hart, and you know, there's a whole name for this because it happened in you know, in a particular city, and it was like this big controversy. Somebody please save me. What happened with the Bret the Hitman Hart? What's the name for it? I'm spacing.
Bret, what was it with?
It was like when they canceled his contract and he was going to go to a different promotion company, and like it didn't go the way that it was supposed to on script. It's a classic story that if I had actually prepared for this, I would be able to have you the reference, but the riff took me, just like the baby pig situation. Bret the Hitman Hart, like
look it up while you're answering this question right here.
Yeah, who's the greatest wrestler and satirist of all time, and why? The greatest wrestler of all time, I would probably say Goldust was really cool. I really dug what Goldust did back in the day. The greatest satirist of all time is Hegel. Hegel's one
out of all the wrestlers, you pick Goldust.
Yeah, it's the most like spectacular of the spectacle. And he's a satirical character too. Like he's leaning into the spectacle. Like he's literally throwing gold dust in the air. Like his name is Gold Dust. He's throwing gold dust in the air.
What was his deal?
Here's the thing.
Like people that I didn't pay attention to that much.
That's why I like it. He's one of those like auxiliary characters that isn't necessarily the main star of the show. Right? He's there to fill time, and he's there to like, you know, he's like a really good like stand-up comedian.
You know what he's like? He's like the satire.
There you go. He's not the star of the show. He's there to like make fun of the show and to take the show to such an over the top that when you see the main act, it's realistic, right? You come back to a point where it feels realistic to you. So you've had this like over the top experience that the performance that you're actually going to see next, the main act, seems more realistic. You see how they do this with narrative building, and you can only do this live. If I tried to write this down it would take a book the size of the Bible, and I'm talking about, you know, this non-main character Gold Dust, and what they did and what purpose they served in this overall like arc of storytelling. You know what I mean? It's the Montreal Screwjob. See, I nailed it. Nailed it.
Yeah.
Nailed it. So I told you it's named after named after the city that it took place in.
Now, what is this? What happened?
So he was supposed to. It was 1997.
They planned the outcome of the match without his knowledge. Caused him to lose the championship. So he thought he was going to win the WWF championship, and he lost.
And it was his last performance. So he was supposed to come out on top, and they screwed him over at the very end. And now for the rest of his career, he's this bad guy. So they really tried to, do a number to the character, which is really affects you as an actor, where, you're engaging in this, it's a portrayal. It's really a sad story when you actually look into it. There's all sorts of podcasts and stuff about it. They did them really dirty, and
I didn't know.
The audience didn't know, they weren't in on it. So this is like, it's when you take what you're doing too serious.
What's the point of doing that? Why don't they just...
Capitalism?
But why would they just tell him he's going to lose?
It's capitalism. They tried to. They were capitalized.
They wanted to get that genuine reaction from him. That's like, wow, that's dedication right there.
Yeah, and it was a screw job because they're forcing him to like break character and really not only like just break down. And
that's insane. You're right. That is pretty crazy if you think about it.
Yeah, it's one of those things that goes down in wrestling history, and that sort of thing, it's going to be lost in 200 years when people bookify this stuff, and they only have fanatics who took that seriously and didn't know what was going on. You know what I mean? So you can see how that story right there can snowball into a deified person that was sacrificed on a cross, and the Judas and all of this stuff. It's there. It's in the narrative, right? It's in just by the nature of the performance, the opportunity arises for something like that to happen. And
now, his brother died too from falling off
the stage, or falling from the rafters. Yeah,
that's a
this
lot.
This is the whole thing about where this is why I kind of get out the hyper absurd post satireness of it, where the entire world is a stage. It gets you into the way that you can view your surroundings to put you in a mindset where doing a defying act like coming down from the rafters is like, that's the obvious thing to do. That's going to take the art to the next level. That's taking the spectacle to the next level. And, you end up dying for it. And, it's tragic and unfortunate. That's, that obviously went off script, and, and that sort of thing happened all the time. People died on stage.
Yeah.
It's not an uncommon thing. People have died during performances and stuff. It's, I don't know exactly where I was going with it, but.
No, I get that. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to ask you about was Nietzsche.
Yeah, Nietzsche.
I don't know what it is about Nietzsche. He's loved by people on the left. He loved by people on the right.
Yeah.
He's this like figure, and he wanted to supplant Jesus as the face of Western civilization.
Right.
Like, did he do it? Like, if he didn't do it, he at least took Jesus down a notch and supplanted him as the Messiah.
He was doing a performative satire. He was demonstrating how people can take ancient Greek ideas and get there, and he was using himself as the mediating third there. It's sort of a he was more satirizing the Socrates character, where he's making himself the fool. And
so thus spoke there's I've noticed something when I read Plato's Republic. Socrates is the guy.
Plato was a wrestler too, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. That's why he got his name. Plato means like broad shoulder.
Yeah,
right.
Nailed it.
But so Plato's Republic, the character of Socrates comes down and descends down into the lowly democracy. From the great high republic, he descends down to the lowly, democratic Athens, right? And he's He's giving his wisdom. He's bestowing his wisdom on the people as this great sage. Now, I think that Nietzsche saw this and wanted to flip this on its head and satirize it and take Zarathustra, who also descends down from the mountains to the lowly and bestows his wisdom on the people. But instead of, it's like
so he's doing it because he's showing that it can be done, right? He's demonstrating that it can be done. He's not saying my name is Nietzsche and this is what I think. He's saying my name is Nietzsche, this is my art. Yeah. Right. If you read the Untimely Meditations, I'll give you the Konami code to understanding Nietzsche, because your point about him doing the Jesus thing is very, very on point. That's what is exactly what he is doing. He's taking the triad, Father, Son, Holy Ghost idea, this classic triad that you see everywhere, that exists because it's a wonderful storytelling device and can be represented on stage, can be represented in so many different ways. So he's doing that with himself. And what he does in the on the use and abuse of history for life is he tells you, this is like the closest that you get to Nietzsche saying, my name's Nietzsche, and this is the character that I'm doing from this point on, where he gives the 3 ways to do history wrong. And that's it. And he goes, I'm just going to make myself a fool, and I'm going to show you how, even if you sincerely try not to do history wrong, you're going to fall in one of these 3 failures. And he doesn't walk you through this. He doesn't tell you, he doesn't hold your hand through it. You have to read the Untimely Meditations. You have to read On the Use and Abuse of History, and you have to understand what he is saying about these 3 tendencies to approach history, and understand that when he says history, he's saying, I'm going to embody history, and I'm going to show you how to do it wrong. I am history, and this is how you do history wrong. I'm a human being, and the people back then were human beings too. So if you treat them in one of these 3 ways, or a mixture of these 3 ways, you're disrespecting their humanity as people. And that is not in the spirit of, how these things came about. I wish off the top of my head, I think he says like the antiquarian, the critical, and the other one, somebody in the comments will know because they actually read the shit and understand, but they didn't realize that it was the Konami code, the up, down, left, right, BA star of Nietzsche. Because, I understood the Konami code, and I looked for Nietzsche's Konami code because he tells you he's got one. And he's saying, it's like, if you don't know what I'm doing, you're not knowing what I'm doing. And that's the point. And most people don't know what he's doing. And by doing that, you can basically set up right-wingers to knock them down, right? You can set them up and knock them down. Like Nietzsche is like, in these moments of showing how you can do history wrong, is explicitly anti-capitalist, explicitly anti-nationalist, explicitly like Judeophilic, like the opposite of anti-Semitic, like Semitic. He like loves and admires Jewish people. Yeah. And, you read his letters to his sister, and like the amount of hatred that he has, and the amount of hatred that he has for Wittgenstein. You read the prefaces of his books, and he goes through and he says, like, Twilight of Dawn of what's the one about tragedy? Birth of Tragedy. In the prefaces, it's, if you have ears to hear, take a look what he says in his self-criticism. He says this is music for initiates. It's like one of the most like Nietzsche at his most honest. Like, I'm not in character yet, and this is me trying to explain the character while still like not giving everything away and not holding your hand. It's just kind of correcting some of the misconceptions about what he's doing. So, he's not, and that's what it is. He, the use of this is music for initiates. It's such a wonderful way of saying what he's saying. And, you know what he's saying there because you have ears to hear, you know what I mean? Yeah. Most people don't have ears to hear. And now, after this, you're going to go and read On the Use and Abuse of History for Life and go, son of a bitch, that weirdo farmer satirist knew it the whole time. and you know, I knew that when I was 13, and now I'm just sort of using people's lack of knowledge of these things to play on these ideas.
Well, so I that's why I love Thus Spoke Zarathustra, because it's mocking the gospel so much.
Mm-hmm.
It's putting a mirror up to it and seeing how ridiculous you are, and it's in such a brilliant way that it's. And I think he's successful. If people actually knew, if this was like a household book that everyone's read, then I think that he did successfully supplant the Gospels as like the main text of Western civilization. I think he definitely did that. But even before that, his first book that he ever wrote, The Birth of Tragedy.
That was the one I was thinking of, Birth of Tragedy.
This is one of the ones that I've read as well.
Mm-hmm.
And the way he looks back in the ancient Greeks, and he's looking back at how he has this way of like dividing up the Apollonian and the Dionysian art forms of how the Greeks reflected their artwork as these models of like truth. Like these are like idols that we should put up on pedestals, and we should have these gods. We should have more than all these polytheistic gods, basically. But he divides them up in this way of like chaos and order, basically. And it's just such an amazing, especially for his first book ever. Like the
philologists, he got a lot of heat from that one from the philologists of his time. They hated it.
I actually can tell you why, because he's not being very academic about this.
No.
He's being very
he's a performance artist. He's doing art. He's not doing academia.
He's doing kind of what I do on my channel when
he's doing what you do.
My pre-recorded videos. I'm making like videos that you can like listen to and like it's like art music or whatever. But like he's not. And like my last video I did about the Phrygian mysteries influencing Christianity, I'll admit this, I took some big leaps over cliffs, and I've connected dots that might not necessarily be there. The Sabbatios thing being Saturn and Dionysus, and there's a trinity there. I can't really show that in the sources, but what I'm saying is this is a possibility. This is one of these things that are the Phrygian world. They had this god Sabbatios. The Christians come along. They had this God the Father and God the Son thing. There's something Bacchic happening, I think, and I put it in the video. Nietzsche is in a similar way. He's looking back at history, and he's being very abstract of how he interprets history. So I can see why all the academics of his time were like, "Bro, what are you doing?"
Well,
because and the last thing I'll say real quick, I'll throw it to you. The Apollonian and Dionysian thing, that's not a thing that you see. Like Plato doesn't talk about that. Socrates or Aristotle doesn't say anything about that. No one says anything. That's his own idea. That's his own interpretation of the past. But I love it.
And yeah, so you got to remember that. Well, now that you know that there is a cheat code to Nietzsche, he is doing a performance, right? So at any given time, he's not necessarily giving you the entire truth. You know, he has all these wonderful quotes about how artists lie to you, right? And the reason that he's saying that is because what we think of as sources, right? They're sources for us, but the sources for the sources weren't the sources we have. The sources for the sources were people like me doing improvisations at agricultural fairs. So at some point, somebody was inspired enough to write one of these things down, and most likely misunderstood the fact that there's a performance going on, right? So Nietzsche knows this, and he knows this because he's on drugs and knows that these people are also on drugs.
But you know what, though? When you spend enough time in these ancient Greek sources, his way of looking at Apollo and Dionysus as these two opposites, in a way, is very correct, in my opinion. As someone
absolutely,
like, I'm not an expert, right? I get it. There's people, classicists, who are probably think like it's more nuanced. There's, you know, it's not that simple. But like, I see what he's getting at, though.
What his entire
this character of Apollo who brings order and righteousness, and he's beautiful, and he's right in every way, and he's there's nothing chaotic really about Apollo. But then you have this character, Exactly. And you're this character of Dionysus.
So remember when I couldn't remember the third there. That was one of the characters that Nietzsche embodies. One of the I guess like if you're thinking of it in characters, think of maybe as character flaws, right? Where monumentalism is one of the character flaws that he's trying to demonstrate. So Nietzsche has this way of building something up only to tear it down later. And if you don't know that he tears it down later, you're going to not, you're going to be responding to the setup and not the punchline. You know what I mean? So, and he's not holding your hand through it. So he may tear something down later, 3 books, because that's the classic. That's what they did, right? So, there's this kind of, getting back to the mimesis theory thing where they think it's a slam dunk that, oh, this thing happened 4 volumes earlier than this thing. It's like, well, that's what they did, right? They told stories over time and, understood the way that people interacted with the stories. So Nietzsche is demonstrating this, how you can set something up, tell an entire story only for it to be torn down later. Because what he is setting up is a demonstration of a flawed logic. And even within, the entirety of it, right, there are perfectly valid logical conclusions and ways to look at it and understand it, right. But you don't understand the performance behind the performance, where he's demonstrating to you that no matter how you look at this is only from your perspective right now. Right. And unless you can go back and feel and experience what the Greeks were experiencing, you're only misunderstanding it, and you only have your experience, and you're putting yourself in your own shoes and pretending that you're in other shoes. You have to actually put an effort to put yourself in somebody else's shoes to understand why they did this performance art the way that they did. And, and I think that's like, getting back to clowning, clown shoes are so big because that's part of what the respect that they do. You can walk around and still do these acrobatics with big shoes. Put yourself in a clown shoe and try to juggle. It's impossible to do if you don't know how to do it. I went to clown school. That's the thing I did. So that's sort of the point.
Yeah.
What do we got?
Robert Herring, thank you for super chat. Every time I perform, it's some kind of satire. Just ask my lovely wife. LOL. Love and peace to you, bro. Thank you for that super chat. I appreciate it.
Thanks. That's great.
It's a good point, too. Yellow Psych is in the house. Thank you for the super chat. Is Jesus a satirist?
Oh, my God. Are we playing the drinking game? Johnny, you playing the drinking game? Great. So this, yes. And the performance that that Jesus was putting on is incredibly misunderstood. So Jesus, the people... Jesus himself was a satirist, but the people that wrote it down misunderstood. The story of Jesus is the story, like, how do
you know what the best example is?
I'm sorry, I'm trying to put this into terms that aren't that are inclusive, because it's I'm just gonna come out and say it. Jesus was a biological female who transitioned into a male and back, and it's in the story. It was using the drugs, and you don't know that because, for the same reason that Sindona is translated as linen cloth instead of a medicated bandage, because the medical side is lost in translation, and it's obscured on purpose. Nice. So Jesus, that's the story that's happening. Mary, the virgin, gave birth to a son. Yeah. Transitioned over time doing drugs, and as that son demonstrated satirizing satirizing the gender roles of the time. I don't want to do you see where I'm getting at? Do you understand the satire? Because it's such a nuanced satire that it's not understood as satire, and it sounds like a ridiculous idea.
No, I can see that interpretation right there. I was going to say before you said that, I think a good example of him being a satirist is in Matthew 12, where he walks through the grain fields on the Sabbath. His disciples are hungry. They pick some heads. And he basically pulls a Nietzsche here against the Pharisees. And he's like, haven't you read what David did when his companions were hungry? He he's sort of, it's like he's showing how silly the Sabbath law of not eating grain on the Sabbath is.
Yeah.
So I think I think the answer is in some cases, yeah. I think there's some good examples of him pulling some satire on his foes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and he probably wouldn't have they would have known this, right? The audience knew this stuff at the time, right? There's the whole, we'll get into the sour wine, sweet wine thing going on here.
That's good.
What I'm gonna say, let's see.
Almost every third year, the oracles. And by the way, anyone who doesn't know, this is a classicist who's been doing this for their entire life. Every third year, the oracle switches polarity from Apollo to Dionysus. Those with ears to hear. So Nietzsche probably knew this as a philologist, and he's and that's a lot. And a lot of academics who aren't necessarily entrenched in this stuff are like, well, what source is he talking about? Where does Plato say this? Aristotle doesn't say this. So where does he get this from? But like someone like Almon who can see exactly what he's talking about.
Let me give you another source. I've got a book that I picked up at a show. I did a show at a bookstore, and I picked up a copy of Derrida's Nietzsche's The Styles of Nietzsche, where he explains like all this stuff about how Nietzsche's approach to writing and all this is fascinating. And at one point in there, so I wish I brought this with me if I thought this was going to go there. He has this long passage where he talks about how Nietzsche praises the Greeks' ability to transcend the concept of gender. Like literally like says the Greeks had a way of transcending the concept of gender, and he didn't use the modern terms that we have now, right? Because but it's right there in Nietzsche, and I had to read Derrida to get there. And anybody knows anything about Derrida is too dense for undergrads, and that's my brother's laughing over there because it's a line in a song that I have. So jokes on top of jokes on top of jokes. So Nietzsche was aware and like embraced this whole this whole possibility of transcending gender and how it's just a construct. It's not a thing that exists in. It's not a thing that exists in reality, objectively measurable.
To the ancient Greeks, gender was very fluid. There are a lot of situations, there are a lot of sources you can point to where it's good, and it goes both ways. Where people,
the Bible, when Jesus transcends
themselves,
it's right there. If you want to go back,
like that's how the ancient Greek world was. It wasn't
how the ancient Greek world was.
Actually, it was Dr. Ramon who pointed this out to me. They don't even have a word for gay.
They don't have a word for homosexuality because
there is no word for that because it's just love. It's just the same thing as anything else.
Right. And the thing about Nietzsche knowing that the concept of gender is this like arbitrary construct that people created is the same reason that he knows that numbers aren't real, because it's just this abstract thing that we apply to something. It's our opinion about an object, not anything about that object in reality. And to a certain extent, in Nietzsche's mind, human beings are objects, right? So the same thing that we do to objects, we do to human beings. And one of those things that we do to objects that we do to human beings is this responsible for this concept of gender. And Nietzsche says this. And it's ironic that you have all these right-wingers that, are all up in arms about, gender and all that stuff. And they don't read, and they're like, I love Nietzsche, blah, blah, blah. But also out of the other side of their mouth have this problem with gender. It's like, well, Nietzsche does it. And it's right there. If you read Nietzsche, you're not reading Nietzsche. You're reading Jordan Peterson's opinion about Nietzsche.
Right. I'll never understand this like far right love for Nietzsche. Like, how much have you read of him? Like, I don't know. What is this? Like, it is very strange. And I think you're right. I think it's through Jordan Peterson.
And you know where Jordan Peterson got it? Nietzsche's sister.
Oh, is it?
Nietzsche's sister.
Oh, that's a later book that's not real.
Well, yeah. Nietzsche's sister did a compiling of like all of these like handwritten notes and stuff, which is and if you understand like the reason that he didn't use that stuff is because he was putting himself in a headspace to write all of these things down and work these ideas out. So the reason he never released it to the public was because these were exercises in thought experiments, not the ideas of Nietzsche himself. These are the ideas of Nietzsche saying, all right, there's these three flaws. So let's take these concepts and see what happens. And Nietzsche's sister, went on and screwed it up because her husband was a fucking anti-Semite. And do you know what happened to them when they made it to South America?
No.
Do you know the story of Nietzsche's? All right, this is wonderful. So Nietzsche's fucking sister's racist ass husband. There was this whole thing to go to South America. I think Paraguay. I don't know, Argentina. There's a reason why all those Nazis are in South America, is because they fled there and they tried to make a new Germany without Jews in South America. Yeah. And they ended up interacting with all of these indigenous people who knew all of these ways to not get eaten by bugs. So Nietzsche's sister's husband's racist, proto-Nazi cult that went out to South America got eaten alive by bugs because they didn't listen to the natives and use the remedies. Died? That's how they died. They got eaten alive by bugs because they didn't listen to the natives who told them, yeah, if you just take this and you rub this on your feet, you're not going to get bit. They said, no, these people are savages. They don't know what they're talking about. So they go and get eaten by bugs.
Amazing. That's a great story.
It's wonderful. I improvised all of that, but most of the details are there. You can go in depth and look at it for yourself. It's a fascinating story. They got what they deserved.
Yeah, they have all those random German settlements down in like Venezuela.
Exactly.
Where all these Nazis try to run away to. Last thing I want to talk to you about is the Elpenor thing.
Elpenor.
Wait, was it the Elpenor thing? No, the wine thing. I'm sorry, the wine.
Oh, wine. Yeah, the sweet wine and the sour wine, right?
Yeah. So real quick backstory. Dr. McDonald has his book of the mimesis criticism, and he's got a lot of examples of in the New Testament where there's obvious mimesis happening, where they're taking the structures of Homer's stories and they're applying it to Jesus and rewriting it for the New Testament. Now, one of the criticisms from some of these apologists that don't want to hear this is that in one story, the wine isn't the same as the other wine, so it can't be the same. And in particular, we're talking about Jesus on the cross and Hector being given wine. When they're both dying, they're both given wine. And McClatchy said, well, one of them is sweet and the other one is sour. So those are different. And I'm like, that's not the mimesis is supposed to be different.
But the thing is that to the audience at the time, they knew what that meant, right? They knew what the signifier of sweet wine was. They knew what the signifier of sour wine was. And to the Greek mind, there was something there. It signified some sort of a balance, right? And I know this from my expertise as a professional chef, being a nerd, looking at the way that old people understood the way that they experience their tastes. They're looking for some sort of a balance in their taste, right? So when you see something in literature that describes the taste of a food and somebody eats it, what they're communicating is that person is fulfilling something that they lack, right? And they're balancing themselves in one way or another. Now, in this particular case, I'm not an expert in the wine. I know that phenomenon is happening, and that's the structure of the mimesis, right? Is that you have the wine, and the wine is the mediator, not the sourness or the sweetness. It's the wine that's important, right? And it communicates something to the audience, right? And there's all sorts of other words that you can get into where, like, was the wine sweetened with honey? Was it sweetened with something else? Was it cut off during fermentation? All of this stuff is in the Greek, but I don't know the Greek yet. So I'm learning Greek for the next 5 years and eventually going to write on this and set some of the records straight and stuff like that. But yeah, the audience, this wasn't lost on the audience. They recognized the satire that was taking place here. They recognized the symbology. They recognized that there's a very clear flipping of the message here, right? So within that, like, that just reinforces the flip, right? This is a point that reinforces the message, reinforces the this person is better than this other person. They're they knew that they knew what the wine signified. We don't know what the wine signified, and those guys are trying to say the wine didn't signify anything, and they're dumb. They're wrong. And my favorite thing is Dennis straight up laughed it. He was like, I'm not even going to address that. So, this is just stuff that I fall ass backwards into because there's all these, wine culture and food is there. So I kind of try to understand it,
Yeah. And they never said anything about the sequence of events. They never addressed.
It's the sequence of events.
Looking for things that are different. And
if the same sequence of events are happening and something is different, if you read Nietzsche, the difference is the point.
It's like
the difference is the point.
It's like Socrates descending down to give his wisdom, Zarathustra ascending down to give his wisdom, but the difference is the message that they're flipping. Like, you can tell that Nietzsche is trying to reverse what Plato did to the West. He wants to, and he does it too, I think. Because Plato, everything's about Plato. Middle Platonism, Neoplatonism. It's all Plato, Plato, Plato. Now so Plato is the underlying philosophy behind all these theological schools. It's Plato.
Yeah.
And now it's Nietzsche, the underlying philosophy behind all these new postmodern schools. He's the new Plato.
Yeah. Yeah. And, there's all sorts of corollaries between, like Plato and Jesus, Socrates and Jesus. There's all sorts of, like parallels there. I don't think they're nearly as compelling as, Dennis.
They're good. Yeah,
they're good though. But I think Dennis is like, mimesis is like awesome. And you can take that method and apply it to those parallels and probably find something profound that wasn't there, because, this isn't a method that, is applied to everything in those ways. And you can apply this method to other things, right? You can apply if you understand what the riff is and what the jokes are, you can kind of do a mimetic satire, like a mimetic critical approach to understanding satire. And you really end up with something like, whoa, there's inside jokes on top of inside jokes that we're not supposed to understand. You know what I mean? And understanding the way that these things historically were constructed as like objects that we can tangibly hang on to now. Most people didn't have that experience with these sources. So they were drawing from other sources. And these sources only, we're looking at copies of copies of copies of copies of copies. But the copies of copies of copies of copies, for it to get to that point, it was, riffs of riffs of riffs of riffs of riffs of riffs of riffs previously. Right. So does that make any sense, or am I just being too?
No, that makes a lot of sense.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I'm riffing on all sorts of scholars that I've seen on your show, and in the chat, people can see who I'm embodying for a moment here and there.
Actually,
who I'm riffing on.
I forgot. I wanted to ask you about one more thing too.
Yeah.
Because someone in the comments just reminded me, corn growing out of the body of Osiris. And James Frazier, he talks about how, vegetation, the flooding of the Nile, water swelling, and then corn growing was thought to be the golden phallus of Osiris.
Right.
What do you think about the agricultural layer here?
How much time do we have?
How much do you need?
Okay, because I can do this for an entire half an hour and explain this. Because agriculture is a 10,000-year-old phenomenon. So you want to talk about the sources of the sources of the sources getting lost. All of recorded history that we have is all agricultural history. We don't have recorded records of non-agricultural people. So we don't know what non-agricultural people's festivals necessarily looked like, because they weren't honoring agricultural deities. They were honoring different deities. And so let's get to Ergot. You want to get into the Ergot? You want to get into the drugs?
Let's get into it.
Okay, let's get into the drugs, because the modern story of agriculture is wrong. Right. The modern story of how agriculture came about is that these women went out into fields and they collected seeds. They brought them back near their caves, and then they planted them and to make bread. Neil, have you ever been in an open field?
Yeah.
You've seen wild grass seeds?
No.
You've never seen a wild grass seed?
No.
They're barely visible. That's the reason you don't notice them. Do you know which ones you do notice?
What's that?
The ones that are that have ergot. Those are the ones that you notice, because the ergot grows on the grass seed and comes out. So what these women were doing was collecting the ergot and bringing the ergotized grass seeds back to their dwellings. And instead of, like, I put it this way, back pre-agricultural times love amber waves of grain. Non-agricultural people love small plots of purple. Does that make any sense to you? You see what I just did there, right? We have amber waves of grain. That's the deity that we honor.
That's that gold and purple image too.
Exactly.
Royal.
The purple is what is being overcome. The purple plays a secondary role. So what these people were doing is saying, we are overcoming these non-agricultural people and we're taking over and putting their golden deity above the previous deity, which was these small plots of purple, because they weren't selecting. This is a story that goes back 300,000 years. This isn't a 10,000-year-old story. So no one was writing anything down.
So you think that's why these writers are talking about Saturn as the husband with a scythe in his hand who reaps the harvest? And they're talking about the golden age that predates this age of Zeus, where everything's all fluxed and chaotic.
Yeah.
Before everything was perfect and everybody had wealth and nobody worked, because Saturn was reaping all this wealth for everybody.
Yeah. So let's take this chronologically.
That's the mythology of that real events that were happening.
We are looking at this with an inherited agricultural mythology. We take the agricultural mindset as granted when that is not the story of human beings, right? Women were not going out into fields collecting wild grass seeds 300,000 years ago to bake bread and to make beer. That didn't happen. That took 300,000 years to happen. And I don't even include the 10,000 years of agriculture, because it's still going on to this day. We just don't look at it. We ignore it, just like Nietzsche's dumbass sister's husband, and you get eaten by bugs, because these people knew how to engage in their lives, because in their environments, because they've been engaging in their environments for much, much longer than agriculture has even been around. So all agricultural myths are young. And the myth of capitalism, that one's only 500 years old. So you can take all of these capitalist myths, throw them out the window. You can take agricultural myths, throw them out the window. And you want to really talk about, the human race and human existence and human history, the story is 300,000 years, not 10,000 years.
And that's why behind all these myths, even Jesus himself, even the New Testament myth, you have this layer of agriculture, this layer of dying and rising. And Hesiod's theogony, he's looking back at the past and he's saying the golden age, and he's relating it to agriculture.
Yes.
That's amazing. I never
so take a look at it this way too. So agriculture as a archaeological phenomenon is about 10,000 years old, but there is about a 4,000 to 5,000 year transitionary period where people start to adopt these techniques and it becomes such a hegemonic thing where most people are agriculturalists and the non-agriculturalists have been replaced. So the amount of time that took place, that this transition period happened to where we have a recorded history, that transitionary period is longer than the entire history, from Jesus. It's longer in the history from, the pyramids to Jesus. Like that amount of time from this transitionary period of the non-agricultural mindset to the agricultural mindset,
people have to realize,
so important.
You got to realize that context. We have more time. We're closer to Jesus now than the people living in Jesus as they are to the dawn of agriculture.
Or the dawn of the dawn of civilization would probably be right. Which, if you want to get into like my anarchist position, I'm an anti-civ anarchist because I don't look at it in terms of this civilization myth. So you can go and Google what anti-civ anarchism is. It's fascinating stuff. There's lots of good stuff in there. So yeah, the myth, the agricultural myth is so dominant in our culture and so dominant in our inherited mythologies that all of our mythologies that we inherit are agricultural mythologies, and we've lost the message.
Or they at least have a layer there, if not.
Well, so there is a 5,000 year transitionary period before something like Göbekli Tepe, and like these phenomena that we have, those things are happening as this transitionary period is happening. So there's a dynamic cultural exchange going on for 5,000 years between non-agricultural people, proto-agricultural people, and people who are full-blown agriculturalists, right? So we have this exchange going on. And the mythologies that we have is the triumph over the previous culture. It's why agriculture is set so high. But in the background, the number 2, this is the purple. This is the medicine, right? This is where all of these things, this is the real story of how these people were selecting for these things. So ergot, right? Because they were selecting for ergot, what they were selecting for originally, ergot is used in childbirth, right? It's used to aid childbirth, to prevent bleeding and all that. There's all sorts of reasons that they were using it, right? They knew that back then because they inherited this tradition from non-human people, a dynamic, prehistoric dynamic cultural exchange that took place while human beings were also interacting with our non-human being cousins. They inherited it from them, right? And what they inherited was this understanding that you can go out and grab this fungus from the grass and aid in childbirth. And over the course of 300,000 years, these grains got bigger because they were selecting for the grains. And as the grains get bigger, you get more medicine, you get more medicine, you get more medicine, you get more medicine, to a point where you're at a tipping point where the grains themselves become edible. And you start selecting for the grains themselves for food rather than the fungus for medicine, right? These people were living, like Nietzsche describes it as like a dream state, and you can talk to all sorts of indigenous people to understand their heritage. There's this dream thing going on. It's because they're embodying the concept that you can die before you die. So David Hume has this fucking thing where life was short and brutish and whatever, blah, 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 blah. It's like, well, yeah, every month these people were dying before they died. So if they died, who cares? You die when you're young, when you die when you're 23, who cares? You've already lived dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of lives,
The Eleusinian mysteries was, anytime you read a source that talks about the Eleusinian mysteries, it's always, they're so awesome that when you get initiated, you no longer fear death. It's the greatest thing that ever happened. And in these mysteries, you have Demeter and Bacchus, purple and gold, grape, which is the blood or the wine, and the body or the bread. Demeter.
Neil, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. Do you know what grape leaves, the medicinal purpose, the reason why people 300,000 years ago were selecting for grape leaves?
Why is that?
You're gonna love this. Hemorrhoids.
Makes sense. They're boofing it.
It assists in hemorrhoids. So the wine is a byproduct of people making sure, like, treating their hemorrhoids. And we drink wine now.
Yeah, and think about this though.
I've thought
that kykeon mixture of these two drugs.
Yes.
Brings the gods enter you. That's why it's called entheogen. The god takes you over. You get that madness, that mania. Yeah. But think about it. Even in the New Testament, you have Jesus saying, drink my blood and eat my flesh. There's a Eucharist there. It's the same story. Mm-hmm. And then, so this goes back to Ishtar and Tammuz. Tammuz he dies. He's the dead seed going into the ground. Ishtar is that like water flourishing that brings the sprout of life back up in the springtime. And so, and then you have the Argonautica myth. I just recently found out that Medea, she's from Libya and has a kingdom in the Black Sea. Well, it turns out that during the Augustan period, whoever controlled the drugs controlled the wealth, and the drug trade came from up through Africa and up to the Black Sea. It's literally the same route that the Argonautica goes in. And I'm wondering if this golden fleece myth has something to do with these drugs.
So here's the thing that happens to drugs when you start to apply agricultural techniques. Do you know what happens?
What's that?
The potency dilutes.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So there's
for quantity and not quality.
You're selecting for potency is the 300,000-year-old tradition instead of abundance, right? So the agricultural mindset, you take this same grain that people were selecting for potency, where you're concentrating the medicine in these wild funguses, this wild fungus that grows on grain that just so happens to aid in childbirth. If you can concentrate the potency of these things over the course of 300,000 years, the grains themselves get bigger. So agriculture is a byproduct of a medicinal culture that predates it. Wine, right? The other symbol of agriculture is a byproduct of a medicinal culture that predates it. People were using grape leaves to treat hemorrhoids, and now we drink wine. And there's all this mythology around it. The medicinal culture is lost because the type of grape leaves that they had to them at the time, they were such high potency because they were selecting for the grape leaves to shove in their ass when they need them because they have hemorrhoids. And we don't know this.
It probably helps with the administering of these special medicines for the rites.
The alabastrum is an inherited tradition that dates back probably to non-humans. Non-humans probably knew how to, our non-human cousins probably knew how to use alabastrums to administer medicine, which is why grape leaves turned into what they are. And the alabastrum, you know what else it was used for? It was a medicated dildo, which went into where babies come out of. So these things were multiple purpose, and we don't use them anymore because we have modern agricultural mindsets and modern techniques for doing this.
You could only wonder what was going down in next to Athens and the Eleusinian mysteries.
Oh, do you know? So you know the story of like there's this long walk, right, that you're supposed to take the whole time.
You're supposed to walk from there to Athens, and you're supposed to, if you see people, you're supposed to mania out. It's supposed to.
There's one moment in this whole trail. I think I remember reading in Rock. I might not. It's probably maybe somebody else. But there's one moment where the locals berate you, and they throw things at you.
Yeah,
they make fun of you.
That's what I was saying.
Okay,
that's what I meant to say. When the people who just got initiated, not the people who just got initiated are supposed to take that walk. It's basically like a walk of shame.
Mm-hmm.
The people who aren't who are just there to watch. Your job is to scream. It's the craziest, nastiest shit. Yes. Like you've been to a music festival before, right?
Yeah.
And what happens? If you walk around, people are going crazy.
Yeah. And this is what I was getting at previously, where
rights, dude, and we don't even realize what we're doing when we're in these spaces.
Well, this is what I was getting at previously, where there are people performing acts and they're doing performance art in different places that aren't just, the stage, right? So as you're going through this trail, it's sort of like, this long walk, you're interacting with these performance artists, right? And these are local people who do these performances on a regular basis, right? They're the people, and there's this whole hierarchy of like learning and how to do the performance correctly and how to riff correctly on the performance to stay true to the performance so that the people get the same experience every time. There's this, it's very sage, right? And there's this interaction between the medicine giver, right, and as well as the people who are assisting in the performance and assisting in the experience of these people. It's sort of like when you go to Disneyland and there's all the characters, right? There's all these characters those are actual people that are in those costumes. But if you're on drugs, you might think that's an actual larger than life rabbit, right? So you never hear the voice of the person that's in the rabbit costume throughout history. You hear the voice of the person that's on drugs, not knowing the concept of kayfabe and, missing the point. So we have this hysterical cultural record that is just based off of people misunderstanding satire for 10,000 years. And they misunderstand it because language came about by women selecting for inoculated fungus, fungitized grasses in the field. And they said, this one is good, that one not good, right? The objects that they were pointing to, and philosophy is women's work. Philosophy is women's work. Language, like this is the logos.
Wisdom is wisdom is a
yes,
gendered word that's a feminine.
Yes,
she's actually deified both in Greek and Hebrew sources.
Yes,
as a goddess. You never see wisdom ever as a god, not once. No. It doesn't exist.
What else is so? There's the other concept of the logos, right?
That's that all-pervading axiom.
Yes.
Sort of.
Yes. So this is a 300,000-year-old inherited tradition that has been lost to time. The wisdom is how to interact with your environment so that you don't die during childbirth. That's what wisdom is. Logos is women putting this into words so that they select for the right drugs and not a poisonous drug so that they die accidentally.
Right.
And that's how language came about. And I'm able to take this tradition 300,000 years old and confuse right wingers and get them upset. It's a wonderful thing. It's a beautiful thing. I love it.
This is Plutarch. At the point of death, the soul has an experience like that of people undergoing initiation into great mysteries. Then immediately before consummation, every possible terror, shivering, trembling, and sweating of amazement. But after this, marveling light meets with the wonder. He's talking about the Elzidian rites. An open country and meadowlands welcome him. In that place, there are voices and dancing and solemn majesty of sacred music and holy visions. Oh yeah, that's a different one. So yeah, basically the mysteries was so amazing, but it started off. You take the kykeon, you start to throw up, you get nauseous, you're getting the toxins taken out of your body, like ejected out of your body. You feel like shit. You get real scared. It's real panicky, and then the next phase comes, and then the ecstasy hits, and then you're like, oh, I'm saved.
And the reason that people can't recreate this kykeon that these people were doing is because the grain that they were growing back then isn't the same grain we grow now. The grapes that they were growing back then aren't the same grapes that we were growing now. So the complex pharmaceuticals that we could perceivably brew aren't the same. It's probably extinct. Probably. Yep. It's probably not the same thing. You may have had some sort of particular grape that was also drug inducing, or made some sort of technique for making higher alcohol, and the wine that it was mixed with may have been ergotized itself. So these are complex things that we don't have, access to anymore. And this is how I got into all of this, is because I grew up wanting to be the guy that goes to archaeological sites and takes the swipes of pottery and analyzes what these things are. So that's, I wanted to be that guy growing up, and I ended up being a famous chef. And now I own a farm, and I'm learning Greek, and I'm going to go, after I learn Greek for the next 5 years, go back to grad school and to get that anthropology degree I bailed on.
Nice. I might be with you on that. We'll see.
Yeah, I'm gonna start taking Greek this winter when I have some time off from the farm.
That's it. Yeah, I started learning Greek myself, and I'm seeing a lot of progress really quick. Amon's a good teacher. He knows what he's doing.
I've had the luxury of being able to ask him ahead of time and sit in some of the classes and see what the experience would be like. And
you got a head start.
He was so accommodating. He was like, yeah, if this is for you, let's take this. And I was like, this is wonderful. It's exactly what I didn't do in college, because I knew that I wasn't going to get that experience in an academic setting.
We're doing that magic philology that we're pulling out all these necromancies, and we're getting these wands made, and we're ready. We're about to be wizards in the next couple of years.
We're all going to be wizards. And here's the thing: it's like, I don't know the Greek, but I just fell ass backwards into this stuff by studying food. And anybody watching this right now, I'm like I was telling you before, I've just been a fan of Neil. I was one of his first 1,000 subscribers, and in the background I've been making this silly art, and now I'm on a show, like, not promoting my art, or I'm just talking about other people's art. So go ahead and look at my art if that's something you're inclined to do. But part of my art and my joke is that I don't actually want people to see my art. It's so satirical. That's my brother's channel. There's a bunch of stuff dating back years and years and years. And
subscribe here. I also have this one I want to show people before we go. This one is it's an album that you made.
Yeah, you can, if you I
was driving today and listening to this, and it's really good. Really well done. Really well produced. I reckon, check it out. He's got 12 tracks on here. Really well produced. Links in the description for that one as well.
Hell yeah. That was fun. My brother fell asleep over there because I broke character so many times. He was playing the drinking game, and now he's asleep.
Well, I'm gonna hit the outro, and just so everyone knows, links in the description. And you have just attained true gnosis.
Hail Satan.
Hail Satan.